So welcome. Welcome to the second Brams-Otp Q&A session. We are organizing these sessions every 2 weeks to let people know what other users of the OTP are doing. And I think the first one went pretty well. And now I have two other friends that have agreed to talk about their projects. One of them is Yondu Mori from McGill University and Aaron Glick, also from McGill. And they requested an account, or well, not requested an account, but they started thinking about using the Brams-Otp a few weeks ago. And I think they are almost there in their experiments, and I'm happy about that because you know, it's sometimes difficult to put everything together and make it work. But today they are going to share their experience, where they are, what they are doing to make it work. Of course, we are always changing stuff, even when the experiment has started or when you are already having participants. So I want to thank them for being here, and we're going to go. I think we have more people here now, so we're going to go ahead with Yondu, and I think I can make you co-host. Let me just do it real quick, and then just another. Okay, and so we're gonna have Yondu first, as I said, then Aaron, and then me. I'm gonna talk a little bit about a quick example that I have, and then we'll open for questions for anyone that is here. Can ask any type of questions regarding the online testing or how they are setting up their experiments or what I can do to help you. So thank you, Yondu. You're first.
Okay, I will share my screen.
Yep.
I just have some short slides. Share. Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Does everyone see? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can see.
Perfect. So yes. Okay, good. So yes, I'm Yondu. I'm a PhD student in the School of Communication Sciences and Disorders, and I work with Dr. Mark Pell, and we look at social perceptions as they are affected by how you process speech, specifically speech that has varying tones of voice. So the online experiment or the research question for my online experiment was investigating how a speaker's Canadian English accent can interact with their ethnic appearance, either being of European or East Asian heritage, as well as their vocal confidence level. So whether they're expressing confidence or doubt, and how that can affect their perceived competence and hireability in a job interview context. So our experimental design was investigating how the expectations that you form about a person's, I guess, competence from their voice when you see just how they look. So at time one, we were just wanting to present images of faces. And then at time two, we would then see how those competence ratings change when you know more information about that speaker. So we would present images of these faces again, and they would pair them with speech that was either in a confident tone of voice or a doubtful tone of voice. So then once we kind of knew that this was going to be the overall design of our experiment, I started looking into ways to implement online experiments. And one of my colleagues had actually shared this paper with me by Soter or Sote in all 2020. And it had this really great table that gave just like an overview of different software that you can use for online experiments, hosts, and recruitment services. So instantly, like, these experiment builders were appealing because they were all free. And then I had to start thinking about hosts. So that's where JDOS or Yatos like comes into play, because in our lab we hadn't really set up having a server to support online experiments. So this is where the Brams-Otp was very, I think it was a very lucky coincidence that this worked out. But it's also great because we can see how it supports a lot of software for building experiments online. And then in terms of recruitment, in my lab, we've used Prolific for a couple of years. So I kind of already had that set up, and I'm happy to answer questions related to Prolific if people are interested in using it. So this table really influenced, or this article, yeah, and this table really influenced my decision making. So then in terms of was with JDOS. So I just started going through, so we have JS Psych, there's lab.js, and there's Open Sesame. So I started with Open Sesame, largely because I didn't have a lot of programming experience. I have extensive experience using R, but not in, I guess not in other languages. So I started with that one. So yeah, this is to give you a timeline of kind of like from the beginning of this concept to basically now. So May decided to do an online study. June started working with Open Sesame. I ran into issues using Open Sesame. Not that it's like a bad program. I think it's actually quite good. It's just that what I wanted to do, which from what you've seen from my design is not too complex, but I found that Open Sesame was best for experiments that it was already programmed to do, I guess. So because it's not like a lot of coding, you can modify some things, but it's not a lot of coding. It's a lot of pointing and clicking, and there's a lot of icons, which I think is good for some of their experiments that they're made for, like eye tracking. There's some eye tracking, eye gaze things, reaction time type experiments that it works really well. It's just a matter of clicking and dragging the functions. But because I wanted to have so many different elements of things and I wanted my experiment, and the modifications ended up being trickier, I ended up like not using Open Sesame anymore after trying to work with it for a few weeks. And I ended up switching to JS Psych, which was just the next thing on that list in the table, which was challenging because I didn't really have this coding experience. I have a lot of experience in R, like I said, but not in other languages. So it was a bit nerve-wracking at first, but it wasn't, it's doable. I just want to give encouragement to people that want to make this transition. It's definitely doable. So for those people that are familiar with R, I have a couple of analogies if you're interested in looking into JS Psych. So JS Psych is made up of these plugins, which I like to think of are kind of like packages in R. So there are these JavaScript files. They help you execute specific functions. So I had used this like a couple of these. So the one that's like survey Likert. So it's just like, it's already a file somebody wrote. It allows you to execute a Likert scale. You just have to call it in your code. Or JS Psych audio button response allows you to play some sort of audio, record responses. These can also be modified or customized, similar to Open Sesame, but I found that the modifications were a lot easier because it's either in HTML coding or JavaScript. And the other good thing about JS Psych compared to Open Sesame is because it's grounded in JavaScript and HTML, there was generally just more support online for any issues I had with debugging or testing things out. There was just, I think there's just more people that are versed in JavaScript and HTML compared to Open Sesame, which is kind of its own niche, but it's still, yeah, I just don't, there wasn't as much support, let's just put it that way. And they do also have some plugins that are specific to certain types of experiments. So the implicit association task, visual search task, closed tests, things that other people in this group might be interested in looking at. So something to look into. And then Jsik also has modules, and you could think about those as kind of like the functions in R. So there's things like Jsik randomization, so you could assign participants to a condition randomly. There's also Jsik data, which allows you to interact with the data that you create. So if you want to provide feedback to participants based on certain things that they click or select within the experiment, you can also do that within these modules. So this is just an example of kind of how my experiment ended up looking in the Jsik or this is what participants see. It's not the Jsik interface, but so at time 1, participants would randomly see an image, and then they do a rating. And a lot of these things can also be customized. The rating scale, how long you want it to be. There's a lot of flexibility there. And then at time 2, they again see an image, and then they hear the audio and complete that. And then at time 3, this is a cool function within Jsik that I wouldn't have been able to do in Open Sesame, is that you can actually, we have them rank the images of the people, or the images. And so you actually have the flexibility to drag these images and move them around in what order you'd like. And this can also be expanded. So you can make this box bigger. You could have them, if you want to do any sort of other categorization tasks, you can have them move things around, and it ends up just logging the position that those images were in, or whatever you want them to move around in a box. So that leads me to August, where it was just a lot more debugging, testing things out in more of an online way. I learned of the Brams-Otp, and then September, or just this past month, more piloting, more debugging, more testing. I launched the experiment last week, collected all of my data from 140 participants, and now it's analyzing the data and knowing how to work with JSON files, which is what you get when you use Jsik. So in like the whole scope of things, from not knowing Jsik to really like committing your time to learning about it, the Brams-Otp is just kind of like the final step that helps you really execute it. But the most of the work is actually like getting the experiment and how you want it to be. So yeah, that's everything, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Yondu. That was a nice PowerPoint presentation. And yeah, we'll have I guess we'll just go directly with Aaron, and then we'll have questions at the end. So thank you very much. Okay, Aaron.
Okay, I'm Aaron. I'm also in the School of Communication Sciences and Disorders, like Yondu, but I'm doing my master's degree, and I'm in the Psychology of Pragmatics lab. So one of the projects that we've been doing is all centered around how children learn from screens. So let me share my screen. I also have a couple slides to go through. So really the point of our study, there's a lot of research that's looking at whether young children can actually learn from screens or not. There's evidence that they can, and practical experience. A lot of children watch something on screen and repeat it, or learn new words from interacting with tablets. But yet the pediatric guidelines also say that children under 18 months shouldn't use.
He's coming back.
Okay,
yeah.
It happened again, so I won't share my screen.
Okay, let's try it, and maybe at the end you can yeah.
Yeah. So I apologize for the brief interruption.
Okay.
So essentially, what our study is looking at, with the pediatric guidelines, there's sort of this exception for video chat because it's more live and it's more interactive. And some of the word learning studies in infants show that this thing called social contingency, which is the bundle of gestures pointing to a child of how they're interacting, and phrases saying like, oh, I responding to you in a accurate timing and in an accurate way. The social contingency piece is really important for children interacting with screen media. So our study is designed around this idea of social contingency and also directed social cues. So in a lot of children's programming, you have a character and they'll talk to other characters on screen, and children it's been shown that children can learn from that overhearing conversation, but sometimes not as effectively. So we're kind of curious if we direct these social cues to the child specifically versus somebody on screen, if that impacts their ability to learn words from screens. So the basic task that we're looking at is a novel word task, where we show the child a new object that they've never seen. We give it a name, and we also show some kind of action that's associated with that object. And then we test to see if the child can produce the name of that object, and then also pick that object out from a set of other things, from a set of other objects. So for this experiment, we were doing it in person. Part of what we wanted to do too is show kind of this transfer of learning on screen to off screen. But obviously in an online context, we can't really do that. So instead, what we're kind of adapting is this focus on social contingency and this focus on the socially directed cues. To do that, we're using JavaScript, JTOS, and WebEx as well. Because one of the challenges that we had in adapting our experiment was we're working with children. They can't really use a mouse or use a keyboard really reliably, especially the younger children in our age group. So we can't, a lot of the online platforms require the user to kind of interact with the computer in a way that children aren't going to be doing and can't do reliably. A lot of the child studies use kind of longer term tablet devices or things that the child can get familiar with before they start collecting data. That was a big challenge in adapting our experiment to JS Psych, because we had to figure out how to progress the experiment in a way that doesn't necessarily need the child's input. It's also a moderated study, since we're having a live teacher teach in the video chat condition. We're having a live teacher explain to the child and teach these objects. And in our data collection, we also need audio and video recording. In our lab setup, we had a really nice design where we had video of the child's face as they were interacting with the computer, but also a kind of a video camera behind them so that we could get more information about their movement and more information about what they were actually pointing to on screen. Since people are doing this from their houses, we can't really do that for our experiment, but you find ways to adapt, and for that, we're using WebEx to do all of the video recording. That decision was largely based off of McGill's IT directives, which video conferencing platforms were approved for research purposes. So there's been a lot of challenges in figuring out exact recordings and setup for each participant, because they're going to have a different webcam, a different set of speakers, a different computer. So standardizing that across everyone has been a task in of itself. So the other thing that I wanted to mention, at this point, we have the experiment coded in JS Psych. We are kind of finalizing are getting ready to pilot our test with some children. And then we'll probably tweak the experiment after that, after we see how it works. And then in doing that, working with Jsik, my advice is for any custom plugins, start small, add features as you go, and then you can, it's much easier to adapt from existing plugins than to try to recreate the wheel. Jsik has a really big library of plugins, like Yondu was saying, and if there's not a specific feature in one of them, it's much easier to add that feature than to kind of generate your own. Displaying images on the screen, consider whether they should be fixed size or relative to the screen size. For our study, we're going to have multiple images on that screen, and changing that for different browsers and changing that for different computers is one thing to keep in mind. And Jsik is able to do that very easily. And then any audio and visual stimuli, test on different browsers. It's really important to test on different browsers and make sure the settings that you have for those work, and that you can recommend different browsers for participants to use so that it's a consistent experience. And then just on the testing management side of things, in JTOS, there's the thing called batch session data. When you create the worker links, you can actually input some information about those workers, and that will go directly to Jsik. And that's how we've chosen to manage our testing conditions and load up, for example, the French videos and the French stimuli versus the English stimuli, and then also put in our correct counterbalancing conditions. And the last piece of advice I would say is split your experiment up into different components. That makes data analysis a lot easier. It also loads stimuli faster on the participant end. And yeah, that's sort of the advice that I have. I don't have much on recruiting participants, but I can tell you our plan in kind of the Q&A session if people are interested.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. That's great. So I guess we still have a few minutes. I'm gonna grab on the concept of plugins in Jsik, because I think both of you are using you're using them, and actually I found that they are very easy to recreate or modify, right? I mean, I want to show you something that we have in the. I'm gonna share my screen. I think, did I? Oh, Aaron, can you make me? I think for some reason I gave you host permissions. If you go to participants, I don't have. Okay, I think
host now.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Okay, cool. So let's go back. Okay, now I can share my screen. Okay, I'm gonna share my full desktop. So, or actually, no. Yeah. Or first, I'm gonna share this. Okay, so I am in Chrome right now, and I'm gonna first. I think I'm gonna go to the Brams website. Oh, it's right here. So if you go to the Brams website real quick, and we go to participate in an online study, and you scroll down, you're gonna get to this training page. I wanted to show it if you haven't not seen it. If you have seen it, I am trying to update it as much as I can. All the videos of these sessions are here. There's a video by the original developer of JTOS, Christian. And here at the bottom, I have put some links, and I have these. I wanted to show you these plugins that Michael Weiss, which is a postdoc at Brams, has developed, and he kindly shared with us. He also presented last Q&A session, and he shared his GitHub material, the materials that on GitHub. But I wanted to show you this. Here's a link to a zip file of the plugins that let you record audio. So I'm going to try to do that right now. So if you go, I'm going to go to my local JDOS installation, and here is what I have. I created a small script on Jsik, and of course with HTML and JavaScript, and I am just to test, and I think it's gonna work right out of the box. I can show you the details of it. What you can do is you can download that zip file, import, click on import study, and it will show you or ask you where the study is, and you just can upload the zip file and you can test it on your own in your computer. So if I click run here, hopefully it's gonna work. Press any key to begin, and then this is gonna request access to microphone. So if I click record, I'm gonna say this is a recording made in the second Q&A session. And then if you go stop recording, that would go here. And if you look at your results, I think if you go to your results page, the last experiment was this one at number 4. And here's the file, some specific file name, well, is the name that we gave. And then if you download it, and I'm just gonna save it in my desktop, I don't know if you're gonna be able to hear that, but let's try. I'm gonna say this is a recording made in the second Q&A session. And then if you go stop recording, okay, I don't know if that went through. Yes, all right, cool. So so Michael said, okay, share it with everyone. And it's there for you if you need to record audio. It's just, I'm gonna show you what they are actually in, I think I'm sharing my Chrome window. I'm gonna try to share my Finder. So I'm gonna stop this, I'm gonna share. Oh, what am I? Oh, here. So if you go to desktop, and so these two things are like Jsik has its list of plugins here, and as Aaron said, it has a lot of them. But then I have put them here as plugins, Michael Weiss, and here these two are the plugins that you need to include in your code, and I just plugged them in and I tried it and it worked. So just to show you that, I mean, those plugins exist. So if you want to record audio, I don't think Jsik have something like that. And also, I wanted to share with you some work that we are doing regarding multi-language experiments. Of course, here in Montreal, it is very useful to have a automatic translation of the language you are using in your experiment. That is being developed by Nick Foster. So if any of you have, I mean, probably we'll be showing something in the next Q&A, but if you have questions about that, we can totally try to help you or give you more information about that. So having said that, I think it's we're good. I mean, if anyone has any questions, just open your microphones. Let's see, let's wait a couple of minutes or a minute.
I have a question.
Hello, Jorge.
I'll show myself since. Just a question for Yondu. One of the concerns or issues with online testing is the reliability of the data. So participants not finishing, clicking randomly to get as quickly as possible, the same person running this experiment over and over to get more compensation. So I don't know if you have some sort of sanity checks in your experiments to ensure that doesn't happen, or do you have a sense of how much of your data is usable at this point?
Okay. So yeah, there's a lot of things. So one thing that helped is that my experiment is pretty short, which I did intentionally because I was nervous about online experiments, the reliability, and participants' engagement. And then in addition to that, I have things that are like attention checks. So at the beginning, we have some audio files that we play them, and we say that, and like they hear a sentence, they have to fill in the blank, click like multiple choice, like what did they hear? And they know that if they like, I guess, fail that part, that they, we're not going to, it's not like we're not going to compensate them. We still will, but it's like it comes up in our system that they failed the audio test. So anything else they hear after that point, they may not have heard anything. So we also, so we had that. And we also, before the main part of the experiment, we had them do kind of like a, I guess, comprehension type test. So we were testing whether they were paying attention to a job description, where they had to answer multiple choice questions. And if they had to get like 3 out of 3 on these questions, or like 100% accuracy on these questions, and if they weren't 100% accurate, it would just continue to loop through until they got them all right. So there is that function within Jsik, which is good if you really want them to have a certain proficiency. And then what else did you say? Oh, participants doing the link multiple times. In JDOS, there is the option of, I think it's a general single worker. So if they get that link, they can only run it once. And even if they even like X out of the browser, depending on other specifications that you put, it basically locks them out. They can't do it again. The only way for them to do it again is if you advise them that they have to like clear their cookies and their cache data, and then have them retry the link, but most participants will not know this information. So that is one way that you can ensure that you're only going to have data from one person once. I don't know if I covered everything.
Yeah, pretty much. So just out of curiosity, 2 quick questions. How long was the experiment altogether, and how did you compensate them?
So the experiment, I piloted it with a lot of people. It was one of those things that was hard. Some people read fast. It's hard to really gauge what's too fast. So piloting it with like 10 people, it took about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. It was pretty short, which I know is not ideal for a lot of things that we study, but it worked in this case. And then in terms of compensation, we used Prolific. So through Prolific, so my supervisor, Dr. Mark Pell, we have like a lab credit card, I guess, or something that like is allowed to have a credit card access through this system. And you basically just load money onto it. And then participants already have an account in this system. They get emailed links when new things, new studies are released that they are eligible for. So they have to fill out a lot of pre-screening information, their age. There's a lot of language information also that they have to filter. So you can just filter that out instead of actually explicitly asking people. And then through that, they get access to a link through JDOS. You can redirect them back into the system really easily. And then you can just compensate them. Their system in Prolific is pretty easy. You could just compensate them by like approving their submission or their results after you go through it. And then it just deducts from the amount of money you've already put in the system. Yeah, if you had specific questions about Prolific, I could ask how it actually works in my lab. But from my perspective, just going through this, it's pretty simple.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and just a quick question: out of all your data, what would you say that what's the percentage of good data that you think you have, even if you had people that didn't complete the experiment? How do you think is the percentage rate of your?
So I guess I'm still trying to figure that out exactly. Mm-hmm. So one good thing in I guess, Jsik as well as JDOS is I had actually coded a lot of my questions that they had to answer them. So like I didn't get any incomplete data, let's put it that way. And then within JDOS, like it would only give me their data if they actually made it to the end, into like the finished status. So yeah, now it's a matter of actually going through the data and seeing who actually, like, trying to look at intricacies of people that were not paying attention or paying attention. But yeah, I put those attention checks, and I'm hoping that that at least accounts for some of this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it was curiosity. Thank you very much. Any other question for either Yondu or Aaron? I do have a question for Aaron. You were mentioning that you were using WebEx, if I'm not wrong, to record video, and also that you were. So, are you having both on the same device? I mean, you're recording, or you like? How do you manage that part of having two systems working at the same time? I would say that the platform, the online testing platform, and the video, do they happen at the same time, or how do you do it?
They do happen at the same time. So because we're working with kids and their attention span is short as is, basically the way that we have it set up is we log on to the WebEx call with the parent. The parent kind of sets that up. We ensure that they have the correct link for the experiment, and then basically we set the Jsik link up in the background, and then when they're going through the test, their webcam is still on, and WebEx is recording that. But what the child sees on their screen is the test itself. So in some conditions, they get a pre-recorded video, which is embedded in Jsik. In other conditions, they do a live video chat condition where they would stay on WebEx and then switch back to the Jsik. I have looked into basically embedding a WebEx video directly in the Jsik platform through an iframe, and you can do that. Setup is more difficult than you might think. Mm-hmm. And I haven't tested that at all with JTOS on the Brams server yet, but just some local tests. We haven't figured out a way to make that a seamless process with WebEx running, still recording, even when that embedded iframe is no longer in focus. So
yeah. And just another technical question: have you tried this on a tablet, or everything is happening on a computer?
We are trying to get everything to happen on a computer. I've tested it just on my phone. Mm-hmm. And the Jsik experiment works. We're using kind of relative image sizes, so it scales everything down to the device size, which is kind of nice. But I think for actual testing, we're going to encourage people to use their actual computer screen so that it's a large enough image size that we don't have too much variability in terms of that. Since one of the large pieces of our data is this behavioral coding and the child's gestures, how they're gesturing towards the screen. So we want as large of a recording and as large of an interactive surface that they can interact with.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
I have a question, actually.
Yeah, sure.
So because I'm at this point where I've already finished collecting my data, I'm wondering if there is a way to cite the Brams-Otp, or are we just citing JDOS?
Oh, that's a good question. I should talk to, well, we don't have, I mean, I guess you can, in the meantime, put a footnote that you used this service and a link. But of course, there is a publication related to JDOS, so you could also, because JDOS is not our work. I mean, we are using it, but As you know, it has been developed by someone else. So yeah, up to this point, I think the best way is to just there's no reference like a published source, but yeah, you can put that on a footnote maybe. Yeah. And we have a little bit more time for questions. Oh, I think Adam.
Yeah.
Yeah, here, Adam.
Thank you for both your presentations. I just have a small question. Have you had any feedback or complaints about participants that encounter some difficulties when accomplishing your questionnaires or your tasks? That's it.
Thanks. I guess Yondu, have you had any interaction with the participants?
So when I was piloting the experiment, it was before I had used the Brams-Otp, and I was using my computer as like a web server. And then I was having difficulties because it's relying on my actual computer speed, and it's never really done this web server thing before. So when I did that, I was having difficulty with loading stimuli when participants were doing my study, but I shouldn't even put more detail into that because the Brams-Otp, I've had 0 issues. The only issue I've had with or no issues with Brams-Otp in terms of loading data, as well as having multiple participants accessing the experiment at the same time, the data loading, like that has all been seamless. The only issue I've had with participants is like if they accidentally close the browser, then they're locked out because I had put this like general single worker. If their computer crashes for some reason in the middle of the experiment, also they're kicked out. I have to send them they have to clear their cookies, send them a new link. But no issues in terms of audio, the actual hearing the audio, but that's also because I had to do a lot of testing in multiple browsers, both in Windows and in Apple computers. And I think that process helped me determine what worked.
Cool.
I would also answer that same thing. We tested on our own lab server and had some issues setting that up and also giving access, since our lab server was part of the McGill network, and actually accessing that outside externally posed a lot of IT problems. But in terms of audio and video stimulus on Brams-Otp, we haven't had any issues. Initially, when our experiment has 3 different components to it, and when trying to load the video and all of the image files for those 3 components, if a participant has a really slow internet speed or a really slow computer, if you try to put those all into the same Jsik package and basically only use a single component, some people said it wouldn't load for them. It gave a memory error. But breaking that into different components allows you to analyze the data easier, and also it will load each of the image files and the video files periodically throughout the experiment, which makes it a lot easier for the participant.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. To have different components helps, as you said, make the experiment easier on the computer too. Yeah.
I have one last question for Yondu. Well, Aaron talked about his experiment on the cell phone and tablets and everything, but did you try yours on cell phones, tablets, anything else?
I did not try it on a cell phone or tablet, no. But the one good thing was that in Prolific, if this is a direction that you go in, you can specify that the experiment is done on a computer or like laptop, desktop, or tablet phone. So you could make that restriction from the beginning, which worked out for me. But Yeah, I'm actually curious now if it would work on my phone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other question? Feel free, we have still a few minutes left. I guess I have a quick question for Yondu. I mean, I think because you have finished your testing, or at least the first part of your testing, we have questions about how it went, right? So, in terms of getting the data out of the database, and I am assuming you're going to process your data in R. So, have you had any trouble? How do you think? I mean, it's going to be easy, or what's your approach on the data processing?
Yeah, so yeah, this is an interesting question because this is my challenge this week, which was learning how to convert JSON files to CSV files, because I was just not used to JSON files at all. And I guess this idea about doing the experiment in multiple components, it also is, aside from the fact that like what Aaron was saying about like loading the actual files, it also makes the data analysis easier, because let's just say, like, when you get the JSON files, it's not the neatest thing. Like, because like in my experiment, I have those ratings, like I had shown, which are very, I guess, easy to process, but also there was like multiple questionnaires near the end. There was other sorts of questions at the beginning, and within JSON, it just ends up looking like a list, and then there's arrays in lists. And so like, if it's a questionnaire, it's a super long section. If it's something shorter, it's super short. So it's like, I think even the process of converting this to a CSV is not the easiest once you have everything together, because it's not super uniform. But this is my challenge this week. So yes, I would second the notion of having multiple components for the experiment, because it will help with the analysis part.
I guess what I can say about JSON is that I think you need to sort of know the structure of the JSON file, so that you can, I mean, see the big picture of the whole, because you probably have a huge file with a lot of stuff. So that way the script that you will write will target those specific values that you need, but you probably have also stuff that you don't need in your analysis, right? So yeah, that's a good point. I think me too, I'm going to focus on having something that helps. I've seen a few things online. If I get something, I'll get back to you. I mean, if I find something that it could be useful. Yeah, thank you. So any other questions? I think we've had pretty interesting questions today. Maybe not. Well, I guess we can say thank you to our both presenters, Yondu and Aaron, both presentations. I think, oh yeah, there's one more. Oh no, there's a thank you from Dominique. Yeah, thank you very much again. It's been great to see different approaches and I mean, elaborated approaches on how to use online testing for different purposes. And I'm happy that Yondu, you finished collecting all your data without any problems, because I didn't even, after we interacted at the beginning, we didn't have much, I didn't know what was happening with your project. I'm happy to find out that you finished. So that's great. And well, I'm expecting, Aaron, for you the same thing. And I think we have more people, even Adam, I think is almost there with his experiment. So I'm happy about that. So we'll have another Q&A session 2 weeks from now. And hopefully it's going to be informative, and it's going to give you more information. People are going to be more mature in their their experiments, and we're going to have more people like Yondu that already finished collecting data, and we can share more stuff and give more information to this small community that we are forming here. So if there are no more questions, I think we can stop here, right? Okay, well, thank you very much. I thank you, Yondu. Thank you, Aaron, again, and I'll see you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, same. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. So I'll see you in 2 weeks. Or yep, October 15th is the next Q&A session. All right. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.